Hello, everyone. Let's take a look at some other ways you could augment or develop your questioning techniques using the Have a Life Teaching AI Coach. I've been doing some work with educators who work with a large number of multilingual learners, as well as students who might understand concepts but have struggles in representing or indicating that knowledge in the English language. The strategies I'm going to show you are ways to help students that struggle with public speaking to still participate in discussion and through questioning. Questioning is a great way to assess whether students are learning in the moment or not, and whether or not you have to pivot your instruction. So let's say you are a eighth grade teacher and you want to move away from anyone have any questions? Everyone got that? And you really want to check in and see your students' level of reasoning, but in a way that requires minimal language complexity. Let me give you a prompt that we could use. Teaching a lesson on the causes of the American Civil War. Can you give me examples of questions I can ask at this grade level that require reasoning, but at minimal English language complexity? Because we don't want to dumb down the reasoning that we're expecting our students to do in the content, but we want to make the access for students better so they can indeed engage in that public discourse. So let's see what it gives us. So my AI coach will always start with an orientation menu and then go right into answering the question. So here are some questions. Cause and effect questions, simple language, strong thinking. Why did slavery cause problems between the North and South? What happened when new states tried to join the country? Why did this matter? How did different economies lead to conflict? And again, if you are teaching in an older grade, let's say you're teaching high school, and some students struggle with language complexity, you could be using these questions to still tease out the appropriate content that you're trying to teach. And not only that, I recently did a video on Cornell Notes and really simplifying the Cornell Notes process using AI. So you could be very much putting these questions in for some of your students who do struggle with language complexity. For example, if they are doing Cornell Notes related to a text they're reading. Again, you wouldn't want to do that for all your students, but you would want to do this kind of thing for your students that are struggling with language complexity. So again, lots of different questions that you could ask. And this is so much better than anybody have any questions? Everyone got that? Because the reality is almost everyone, including adults, will say, yeah, I'm fine. When you really want to tease out the exact level of understanding that your participants, your students, your learners are at. So now let me show you another strategy. One strategy I often recommend for teachers that's a really easy way to engender discussion and conversation is think, pair, share, where you ask a question, you ask students to think about it, to potentially write down their answer first. So that would be think, write, pair, share. But definitely you want to do the thinking alone, having them think alone. And then they pair, they find a student, a friend, and then they share, they talk about that. Again, it could still be a struggle if you're not giving guardrails to your students, setting up bumper lanes where you're giving them some of the questions that they might be able to use. But the other thing that's interesting about think, pair, share, in the moment, it could be sometimes difficult to assess that content, their answers, because you want to make sure that you're assessing their content response as opposed to their language response. And you want to be focusing on, did they get the content and not getting distracted by language complexity, especially if your students are multilingual learners. So let me put in, okay, give me 2 sample student responses at different English language proficiency levels for question, let's see, let's go up to one of the first ones. For question, why did slavery cause problems? Cause problems for the North and South. And for my viewers who are not from the United States, this particular war was fought in large part, because the southern states in my country had slaves and the northern states did not. It's much more complex than that, but that is a major factor. So that's why I'm asking this question. So let's see what it gives us in terms of turn and talk. All right, so these are written to show the same historical understanding, but at different English language proficiency levels. So let's see what it gave us for what an emerging English language learner would probably answer and an intermediate English language learner would say. So for the first one, for emerging, slavery caused problems because the South wanted slavery and the North did not. And then they might say the following: the South needed slaves for farms. The North thought slavery was wrong. They could not agree. So again, in here, let's say your student just said slavery caused problems because the South wanted slavery and the North did not. You could always follow up with a why to get that second part. Now let's look at the intermediate response and the expanding English proficiency. Slavery caused problems because the North and South had different beliefs and needs. The Southern economy depended on slave labor, but many people in the North believed slavery was unfair and should end. The disagreement led to conflict between the regions. I would say that would be an intermediate to advanced answer. Let's try asking, is there a potential response in the middle? I would even argue if a student said slavery caused problems because the South wanted slaves and the North did not, and left it there, that would be the emerging response. I would say the intermediate response would be if they added that second line. But let's see what they give us. Slavery caused problems because the North and South believed different things. The South wanted slavery for farming, but the North did not support slavery. Because they could not agree, it caused tension between the regions. So again, you still see some of that reasoning that students are doing. You've seen the reasoning in all those responses. So if you're not seeing that reasoning come back to you when students answer, that is a good indication of needing to say why or tell me more. This will really help your language learners, but I would argue this would help you to determine and validate the answers of all of your students in terms of their content mastery. Now, lastly, let me give you another questioning technique that you could really perfect using AI, whether you use my Have a Life Teaching AI coach or you use your own. I will say that my coach has been taught or trained with my various coaching materials, so I know it's pretty good in terms of understanding and explaining to educators ways to use AI in teaching situations. Anyway, let's move on to talking about cold calling. Lots of teachers will cold call students to keep students on their toes. They'll ask a question and then they'll name a student to answer that question. The reviews are mixed on whether or not this is appropriate because it adds stress in the classroom when students don't know that they're going to be called on. I think doing it in moderation, letting students do a turn and talk first, and then cold calling is fair because it is a good way to ascertain whether or not students are getting your content and keeping students engaged because they never know when they're going to be asked. For your more reticent students, you could also always say before they come in the door, hey, I'm going to be cold calling. Pay attention because I am going to be asking you one of them. The whole class doesn't need to know that. But generally, you want to keep cold calling anonymous and use something like popsicle sticks or a randomizer so you truly are randomizing who's getting called. But beyond that, let's look at ways that we can give students choice in cold calling. So let's say we let them do a think, pair, share, and then we're going to telling them, all right, I'm going to cold call somebody to respond to what you and your partner talked about. But we do want to give the students some control so they feel a little bit more confident and they're not as anxious waiting to be asked, and they're spending their time really thinking and engaging with their peers. So here's the prompt you could use for that. Give me 3 response options students could choose when called on after think, pair, share ends to answer the question. All right, so let's see what it gives us. So here are 3 clear response options students can choose from when you call on them. So option 1, short and direct, lowest language load. So slavery caused problems because the South wanted slavery and the North did not. So again, if you say they could do short and direct, that could then prompt you to ask them or other students why or give me evidence. Option 2, explained with one reason. That could be a middle option. Slavery caused problems because the South depended on slavery for farming, but the North believed slavery was wrong. So that's one reason, farming. But yet the North thought that was wrong. And then option 3, expanded explanation. So now that could be, I would even almost argue that would be great in terms of letting kids determine their level of explanation that they feel that they are able to do. Let me ask for more strategies. Give me more choices beyond just answering with tiered depth. See, so it's saying, so more ways students can respond, not just longer or shorter answers. So they could choose a thinking move. So for example, slavery caused problems because the South believed it needed it for farming, but the North thought it was morally wrong. You're not worrying about sentence length, you're choosing a thinking move. That's because and but. Or students could do cause and result. Slavery caused problems. One result was that the states argued and split. You could also do the North-South statement. And then here's another option, evidence-based choices without long quotes. One fact that shows the problem is blank. Or agree, disagree with a claim. So what you could do as a teacher is you could tell them, okay, when I call on you for cold calling, you can do A, point to one fact, B, agree or disagree with the claim, or C, answer with different levels of complexity. So that gives students a chance. And you wouldn't want to really present these on a bulletin board or on a piece of paper. Even before you do the think and pair share, I would just go over some of the language, set the students up for success. But those are great strategies you could use to alter the language complexity when you want to get at student content reasoning. My name is John Shabari from Have a Life Teaching. I help teachers teach and school leaders lead. If you're interested in working with me, if you're looking for coaching, I offer coaching support on my Subs account for $19 a month. It comes with use of my AI coach. If you are a school leader looking to use my bot, please reach out on Subs as well. If you are looking for coaching in general of your instructional staff, I am at heart a instructional coach. I was a district curriculum director, a principal, and I'd love to support you in that way. So do reach out.